A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
So, you know how everyone online seems to have a PhD in international espionage, the second a building explodes or a missile is spotted. It feels like the phrase false flag has become the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card for any state actor or internet theorist who doesn't like the current news cycle. It is the conversational equivalent of a smoke grenade. You throw it down, everyone starts coughing and squinting, and by the time the air clears, the person responsible has vanished into a cloud of conflicting narratives. Today's prompt from Daniel is about where this term actually comes from and how it evolved from a literal naval trick into this massive, preemptive information warfare tactic we are seeing play out right now in late March 2026.
It is a deep rabbit hole, Corn, and it is one that goes back much further than the first message board or the first televised war. I am Herman Poppleberry, and I have been spending my morning digging into 16th century naval records and recent intelligence briefs. What is fascinating is how a term that started with literal wooden ships and colorful fabric has become the primary shield for the Iranian Foreign Ministry. We are talking about a jump from pirate ruses to 82 million social media impressions in a single 2-week window. It is a testament to how human nature hasn't changed, even if our technology has gone from canvas sails to fiber optic cables.
It is a hell of a jump. Before we get into the modern chaos, though, let's talk about the pirates. I think most people assume false flag is just some modern buzzword, something cooked up in a basement in the early 2000s, but it is actually quite literal, isn't it? You have been itching to tell me about the 1600s, so go for it. Set the scene for us.
Guilty as charged. I love a good maritime history deep dive. In the 16th century, the term was a very practical description of a ruse de guerre or a trick of war. You have to remember that back then, visual identification was everything. There was no radar, no transponders, no satellite imagery. If you saw a ship on the horizon, the only way you knew who they were was by the flag they were flying from their mast. Pirates and privateers would sail toward a merchant ship while flying the flag of a neutral or even a friendly nation. If you were a Spanish merchant ship and you saw a ship flying the Spanish flag, you would let your guard down. You would think, oh, thank goodness it is a friend. You would let them get within range. Then, at the very last second, when they were close enough to see the whites of your eyes, they would haul down the friendly flag, run up the Jolly Roger or their actual colors, and open fire.
So they weren't just being metaphorical. They were literally using a false piece of cloth to get close enough to do damage. It is the original catfishing, but with cannons instead of filtered profile pictures.
That is exactly what it was. And it wasn't just on the high seas. You see the term popping up in religious polemics around the same time. During the Reformation and Counter-Reformation, people were described as flying a false flag of faith. This meant they were feigning a specific religious identity, perhaps appearing as a devout Catholic or a committed Protestant, while secretly working against that group from the inside. It was always about this gap between the identity you project and the actions you are actually taking. It was a tool of subversion. But as we moved into the 20th century, the scale changed. It stopped being about one ship or one spy and started being about entire nations.
Right. There was a shift at some point. It went from being a tactical surprise during an attack to being a way to justify starting a whole war. We have talked about pretext operations before, but I think it is worth revisiting them because they provide the blueprint for the modern conspiracy theorist. Take the Mukden incident in 1931.
The Mukden incident is the classic, textbook example of a pretext operation. The Japanese military wanted a reason to invade Manchuria. So, they blew up a tiny section of their own railway, the South Manchuria Railway near Mukden. They then blamed Chinese dissidents for the explosion. It was a minor bit of damage, but it was enough to justify a full-scale invasion. It was a staged event designed to look like an unprovoked attack. Then you have the Gleiwitz incident in 1939, which is even more chilling. Nazi operatives dressed up in Polish uniforms and staged an attack on a German radio station in Gleiwitz. To make it look convincing, they even brought in concentration camp prisoners, killed them, and left their bodies at the scene dressed in Polish uniforms to prove that the Poles had attacked first. They called it Operation Himmler. It was the shift from a tactical ruse to a strategic justification for the invasion of Poland.
And then there is the one that every conspiracy theorist loves to bring up, Operation Northwoods in 1962. This is the one that gives the modern claims their teeth, because it was an actual, documented proposal from within the United States government.
The Department of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff actually proposed staging terrorist acts on American soil, blowing up ships, hijacking planes, even orchestrating violent riots to blame Cuba. The goal was to create enough public outrage to justify a military intervention against Fidel Castro. Now, it is important to note that it never happened. President John F. Kennedy rejected it outright. But the fact that it was even on paper, that high-ranking officials were discussing it as a viable strategy, gave the term a permanent home in the American psyche. It proved that, at least in theory, a government was capable of plotting against its own people to achieve a geopolitical goal.
And that is the foundation for where we are today. But what I find wild is how the strategy has flipped in the last few years, especially this month in March 2026. We used to think of a false flag as something a government does to start a war. Now, state actors like Iran use the accusation of a false flag to stop a war, or at least to muddy the waters enough that nobody can agree on what just happened. It is a preemptive strike on the truth.
It is a complete inversion of the tactic. If you look at the events of the last 2 weeks, it is a masterclass in this new strategy. You are talking about the Diego Garcia report from yesterday, March 23rd. Reports started coming in that missiles had been fired at the joint United States and United Kingdom base on the island of Diego Garcia. It was a massive story. But before the smoke had even cleared, before the Pentagon could even issue a statement, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman, Esmail Bakai, was out there. He didn't just deny it. He called the reports an Israeli false flag designed to provoke an escalation.
It is like they have the press release ready before the missiles even hit the water. It is incredibly fast.
They basically do. If you look at the timeline, the reports were still being vetted. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte even said they couldn't confirm the report yet. But in that information vacuum, Iran didn't just say we didn't do it. They said this is a staged event by Israel to trick the world into attacking us. By being first to the microphone, they frame the entire conversation. Now, any evidence the United States produces later, satellite footage, debris, intercepted communications, is already viewed through the lens of being potentially faked.
It is clever, in a dark way. If you yell false flag first, you cast doubt on any evidence that comes out later. Even if the United States produces ironclad proof tomorrow, 20% of the population is already primed to think it was planted. We saw that in the Chapman University survey from last year, 2025, where 1 in 5 Americans believe mass tragedies are frequently staged by the government. That is a massive built-in audience for these claims.
And Iran knows that. They are tapping into a global reservoir of distrust. Look at what happened with the Bahrain explosion on March 22nd, just 2 days ago. Initially, everyone blamed an Iranian drone for that blast on Sitra Island. It fit the pattern of recent tensions. But then a report came out suggesting it was actually a malfunctioning United States Patriot missile that had gone off course. Iran immediately grabbed that and said, see, this is the pattern. Everything you hear about us is a false flag or a mistake they are trying to pin on us. They take a genuine technical failure and use it to validate every other conspiracy theory they have pushed.
It makes it impossible to have a shared reality. I mean, if a Patriot missile actually did malfunction, that is a legitimate technical failure that needs to be investigated. But when you wrap it in the rhetoric of a global conspiracy, the truth doesn't even matter anymore. It just becomes fuel for the fire. It is no longer about what happened in Bahrain. It is about the narrative of the hidden hand.
This is where it gets really weird, Korn. Have you seen what Ali Larijani has been posting? He is the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, a very high-ranking official. On March 15th, he started claiming on social media that remnants of the Epstein network were plotting a 9/11-style false flag to frame Tehran.
Wait, the Epstein network? As in Jeffrey Epstein. How does that even fit into a Middle Eastern geopolitical conflict? That sounds like a Mad Libs of conspiracy theories.
It doesn't have to fit logically, it just has to fit emotionally. The Epstein trope is like a plug-and-play ingredient for modern conspiracy theories. It signals deep state, hidden elites, and unaccountable power. By linking the current tensions to the Epstein network, Larijani is bridging the gap between domestic American distrust and international relations. He is speaking directly to the people who already believe the world is run by a shadowy cabal. It is a way to make the Iranian regime look like the victim of the same people that Western conspiracy theorists already hate. It is a brilliant bit of audience targeting.
He isn't trying to convince the State Department. He is trying to convince the guy scrolling Telegram at 3 in the morning. And it is working. The Blue Square Alliance, that data tracking group, put out a report on March 16th that is honestly staggering. They tracked 82 million impressions for false flag conspiracy posts in just a 2-week window. That is an average of over 46,000 posts per day.
82 million. That is not just a few people in a basement. That is a massive, coordinated effort. And the BSA data shows that a tiny number of accounts are doing the heavy lifting. They found that the top 100 accounts are responsible for nearly 70% of the visibility of these claims. We are talking about a highly concentrated amplification machine. It is not a grassroots groundswell of skepticism, it is an industrial-scale operation.
So you have a few accounts, likely state-linked or highly incentivized by engagement algorithms, shouting the loudest, and everyone else just hears the echo. It creates the illusion of a consensus. We saw this play out after the Temple Israel synagogue attack in Michigan on March 12th. The shooter, Ayman Mohammed Ghazali, was clearly identified, but the false flag mentions surged immediately. The Blue Square Alliance recorded over 600,000 mentions in anti-Semitism-related conversations since Operation Epic Fury started back in February.
It is a way to dehumanize the victims and delegitimize the threat. If the attack isn't real, then you don't have to feel bad about it, and you don't have to support any military or legal response. It is a form of psychological armor. We discussed something similar in episode 1470 about the Iranian data deluge. Back then, we were looking at how they were using massive amounts of leaked data to confuse the public. Now, they aren't even bothering with the data. They are just using the concept of the false flag as a universal solvent. It dissolves any evidence, any testimony, and any consensus.
It reminds me of episode 1197, where we talked about Iran's global campaign of unrest. They aren't just fighting on the battlefield, they are fighting in the minds of the American and Israeli public. I think that is the most dangerous part of the 2026 information environment. In the past, a false flag was a specific operation with a beginning, middle, and end. Now, it is a permanent state of being. Every event is potentially a false flag. It creates a kind of narrative paralysis, where the public is too confused to support any decisive action.
It is the functional decapitation of state response. If you can't get a consensus for a counterstrike because half the population thinks the attack was staged by the deep state, then the enemy has already won without firing a shot. This is why we need to be so careful. A February 2026 study by the Media Ecosystem Observatory found that while awareness of conspiracies is high, up to 63% in some regions, actual belief is lower, with about 16% endorsing media elite collusion narratives. That 16% is the target. They are the ones who will spread the narrative and create the noise that confuses everyone else.
So, how do we actually navigate this? If you are a listener and you see a headline tomorrow about a drone strike and the immediate response is false flag, how do you tell if you're being manipulated? We need some practical takeaways here.
The first thing I look for is the preemptive denial pattern. This is the biggest giveaway. If a state actor like Iran calls it a false flag before the smoke has even cleared or before any evidence has been presented, that is a huge red flag. Real investigations take time. You have to analyze flight paths, recover debris, and verify intelligence. Narrative management happens in real time. If the denial is faster than the physics of the event, someone is lying.
That is a great point. The speed is the giveaway. It takes hours, if not days, to verify a missile flight path or a drone's origin. It takes 5 seconds to type Israeli false flag on X. What else should we look for?
Look for those staple ingredients we mentioned. If someone starts talking about the Epstein network, globalist cabals, or the deep state in the context of a specific military incident in the Middle East, they are trying to trigger your existing biases. They are trying to move the conversation away from the facts on the ground and into the realm of abstract, unfalsifiable conspiracy. It is a classic bait and switch. You are worried about a missile, and suddenly you are talking about a shadowy elite in a basement.
We also need to be aware of the top 100 phenomenon. If you see a narrative that seems to be everywhere, check who is actually pushing it. Often, you will find it is the same handful of accounts with massive reach, many of which have clear ties to foreign influence operations. We covered some of those decentralized networks in episode 1316, the one about the gig economy spies. It is the same principle. You don't need 1,000 spies, you just need 1,000 bots and a few loud voices to drown out the truth.
I also think we have to admit that the information vacuum is where these things grow. When organizations like NATO or the Pentagon say we cannot confirm the report yet, they are being responsible, but they are also leaving a hole that the liars are happy to fill. As a consumer of news, you have to be okay with that vacuum. You have to be okay with saying I don't know yet instead of reaching for the most convenient conspiracy. It is a form of intellectual discipline.
It is hard, though. People hate the vacuum. They want an answer immediately. And the false flag accusation provides an answer that feels sophisticated. It makes you feel like an insider who sees through the matrix. But in reality, you are just being led by the nose by a different set of masters. If you are a conservative who cares about American sovereignty and the security of our allies like Israel, this is a direct threat. It is a psychological operation designed to make us second-guess our own defense. If we can't agree that we were attacked, we can't agree to defend ourselves.
What I find most concerning for the future is the role of artificial intelligence in all of this. We are already seeing AI-generated content being used to create evidence for these false flag claims. If you can generate a video of a supposed crisis actor admitting they were paid, even if that video is fake, you have effectively ended the debate for a large portion of the public. We are moving into an era where truth isn't a flag you fly, it is just a piece of software you run.
That is a depressing thought to end on, but I think it is the reality of 2026. We are in a war of narratives, and the false flag is the most potent weapon in the arsenal right now. It is the ultimate tool for dissolving consensus and creating chaos.
It really is. But being aware of the history, from the 1600s pirates to the modern-day Blue Square Alliance reports, at least gives us a fighting chance. We have to be as disciplined with our information as we are with our physical security. We have to verify our sources, check the timing of denials, and be wary of anyone who tries to link a specific event to a broad, emotional conspiracy trope.
Well, I think we have thoroughly deconstructed that one. Thanks for the deep dive on the naval history, Herman. I actually didn't know about the religious polemics part. It is interesting to see how the core of the deception has remained the same for 500 years.
There is always more to find if you look long enough. It is a fascinating, if slightly terrifying, topic. The tools change, but the goal of the ruse remains the same. Get close enough to do damage before the other side even knows who you are.
That it is. Thanks as always to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping the wheels on this ship. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show. If you are enjoying the deep dives, you can find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We will be back soon with another prompt from Daniel.
Stay skeptical, but stay grounded. See ya.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to